Good afternoon, you wee bastards, and welcome back to War Thunder with Koala. I hope you're all doing well. So today's video is going to be a wee bit different. I thought I'd compile a short list of 5 features/additions that I'd like to see come into War Thunder. Now these are going to be the types of things that aren't quite deserving of their own specific videos, in the way that, for example, my series on overhauling the scouting mechanic and adding new light tanks and armoured cars is. I will be finishing that series with the German video in the coming weeks, by the way. But these are going to be the type of little things, small new gameplay features and quality of life changes that if Gaijin were to announce they were adding into the game tomorrow, I'd say, hey, that's awesome, I've always wanted to see that. Now in no way am I saying that these things are of utmost importance, that they need to be implemented, or that there aren't a million and one more important things that need to be fixed with a higher priority, because that seems to be all the War Thunder content I make these days. These are just hypothetical things that are fun to think about, and ideas that perhaps you haven't considered. Also, I've actually not had access to internet all day, because I live in Australia and therefore my internet connection is about as reliable as hit registration in War Thunder. And so in light of that, I haven't actually had the chance to get mad at this game today. That was a joke, I love this game, that's why I do this. Now, I want to lay down some ground rules for these videos, because I do want to turn this into a regular series where I can feature some of your lads' ideas as well, make it a collection of community suggestions that can be shared around, and perhaps even passed on to developers. Firstly, this is not going to be a Gaijube please ad for just random vehicles that people want to see. So please no, add this random German prototype aircraft, or add this particular model of the Sherman, or M48, or whatever. I also want to keep these suggestions away from big reworks, fixes or overhauls, like Gaijin should decompress the battle ratings. I mean, I've heard that 1,000 times in the last 2 weeks. Not even exaggerating. And I've said it myself on many occasions. I think from the list of suggestions I'm going to put forth to you in this video, you lads will be able to see what I mean, so if you have your own suggestions for similar types of mechanics, gameplay features, or anything else you'd like to see implemented, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and without further ado, here are 5 things I'd love to see added to War Thunder. At number 5, now this is something I can only assume Gaijin plans to model, but functional cockpits. What I mean by this is 1, get around to modelling bomber cockpits properly. I mean, the hell is this shit? I feel like you could have held off on tier 7 tanks for another year and modelled these so that they don't look like they're straight out of Roblox. Mainly, however, I want to see all the gauges working correctly, and things like the radar screens in more modern aircraft actually displaying the radar and target tracking, so it doesn't have to just hang out up in the left hand side of my aircraft even when I'm in the cockpit. This is going to be the case in update 1.91 in helicopter cockpits. The screens will show you important information such as the map, and the heads up display will show you all the information which would usually be displayed over here. I'd definitely like to see this modelled for fixed wing aircraft as well, with all the gauges and all the systems showing the information that they should be, and I think a lot more people would probably play simulator mode if this were done. God, I need to make an air sim video. Number 4, rewards for first place. How many times have you had this happen? You've damn near broken your spine from carrying the world's most suicidal team so hard to victory, and you get a nice hefty reward of course. But you get no more for your efforts than if you'd have done that same amount of work, but on a really good team with 4 or 5 players that did even better. Or how about you straining your back carrying, but it's just not quite enough because your team was so bad, and despite your best efforts you just can't quite pull out the win. But you do come first on your team, with triple the score of second place. Shouldn't you get a bonus reward for that? My suggestion would be to attach modifiers to places on the team. For example, first place on the losing team would have an additional 10% modifier added to their score at the end of the match, while first place on the team that won would receive an extra 15%, second place would get plus 10, and third on the winning team would get an additional plus 5%. This gives a consolidation to that guy who tried his best to carry a terrible team, but just couldn't quite bring the useless bastards to victory. I know I've been in that situation many times. And it also has the bonus of incentivizing players to keep trying their absolute hardest even when the match doesn't appear to be going their way, because hey, there's still that first place bonus up for grabs. Alternatively, first place on the losing team could just not be subjected to the loss of earnings that comes from having lost a match, although this does mean that winning the game becomes less important than just assuring that you get that first place prize, and may inadvertently encourage poor play from remaining players on a losing team, like kill stealing, spawn camping, even team killing, and otherwise have the adverse effect. I think reward modifiers work best. They're in the game already of course and they work perfectly fine, but let me know what you lads think in the comments section down below. At number 3, now this is just a silly thing that I find it fun to do from a sort of role-playing perspective, but encouraging, and note how I didn't say enforcing, but encouraging players to taxi their aircraft around an airfield to a designated parking spot when they want to repair and rearm. This one really only works on a map like Korea right now, as it's one of the only air maps with a proper airport that has taxiways, hangars, etc. Sicily might be the only other one actually. I mean, Afghanistan has them, but only on the central airfield, which will light you the hell up with AAA if you even get within the same postcode, and that's if enemy supersonic fighters don't kill you on approach. So we'd obviously have to model bigger, more accurate airfields with these areas, something players have been asking for anyway if we wanted to make taxiing in War Thunder a thing. I love doing this however, it's immersive, it's cool, it looks awesome when players are doing it. It can keep you safe from being strafed if you're protected by a hangar, so it does have a functionality to it, and it could be easily encouraged to players by, for example, granting Silver Lions an RP, or even a few Golden Eagles. I think that would be a really awesome way to allow free-to-play players to get premium currency. I mean, World of Warships just throws the stuff at you. You could also do something interesting and make it so if a player taxis his or her aircraft correctly, they will no longer be able to receive a repair cost for that battle, even if they die. Land, go through the taxiing and parking process and switch your engine off before repairing and rearming occurs, and then taxi back out to the runway before taking off again, and even if you die on that second sortie, you get a free repair. All in all, a kinda pointless addition which I never expect to be added. I would just get some enjoyment out of it, which I already do, so it'd be nice to get some reward out of it and see other players doing it too. Number 2, allowing tanks to bail out without incurring a death, in the same way that aircraft can if they're undamaged and sitting stationary on a friendly airfield. This allows aircraft to change, for example, their ordnance loadouts, and that can be exceptionally useful in RRB, or it can just allow you to leave the game. If you're the last player left and there are enemies all around, might as well just cut your losses and return to hangar, and you can do so without incurring a death or a repair cost. In ground battles, you still require having enough spawn points to spawn that aircraft back in, but unfortunately because of the way the spawn point mechanic works around aircraft, even if you bail out safely on the runway without having died and using up the vehicle, the spawn point cost for that aircraft type is still, I think it's almost doubled for your second spawn, so it's over 1,000 spawn points. I'd like to see that changed. Mainly though, I'm talking about, I'd like to see tanks being able to do the same thing. So a player could leave their vehicle without it counting as a death and using up that vehicle for that match, or adding a death to their stat card and a repair cost to their post-battle results. That way, they could spawn into an aircraft, SPAA, or just a different type of tank as per the requirements of that particular battle at that point in time, and still have their original vehicle to spawn back into later. This would also make a lot of sense for scout tanks with the airstrike modification, which reduces the spawn point cost of aircraft based on the idea that you're providing the team with intelligence which is being used to calling close air support. Needing to sacrifice your light tank and chalk up a death even though you may have been completely unharmed in order to do this, however, really makes little sense and can be a massive pain if perhaps you wish you had that light tank left to use later in the match. The rules would be that your tank obviously has to be completely undamaged, fully repaired, and cannot be within close proximity or line of sight to an enemy vehicle. I know some people have suggested that tanks could only do this in their own spawn, just like aircraft on the runway, or that tanks could do it at specific bases which would be placed onto the map. But I think it takes a wee bit too long to traipse your tank back to spawn just to avoid losing the vehicle when you spawn in something else, which will prevent it being so worthwhile, especially on bigger maps like Fulda, say. I think as long as your tank is fully repaired and in a safe location, you should be able to leave it and utilise your lineup effectively having that tank in reserve to spawn it in again if need be, all thanks to the fact that you kept it safe when you left it. Now for number 1, the one that I actually had in mind when first making this video, but aircraft carriers in air battles, and technically in some tank battles too, really need updating. I mean, I don't know about you lads, but with War Thunder's jet fighters getting more and more modern, it just feels wrong to keep taking off of Lexington class carriers from the 1920s. Seriously, time we had these things replaced. Aircraft carriers are important to Cold War and modern era warfare, that much is just a fact. The aircraft carrier is essentially the centrepiece of nations' armed forces that use them. They are the flagship, almost undeniably the most important single piece of military hardware for a nation, and they're one of the first things that comes to my mind when someone says fighter jets. I think Top Gun, I think the USS Nimitz, I think of F-18 screaming off those catapults. And one of the most recognisable aspects of post-World War II jet-era aircraft carriers, at least in my opinion, and something I'd love to see in game, is the angled flight deck. Not going to go into too much history, perhaps I'll do it in a Koala Explains episode one day, but the idea of an angled or canted flight deck was first proposed by the British in the 1940s to cope with the high speeds of jet aircraft and allow for carrier-borne jets. Naval jets would really struggle to land on an old-fashioned centerline runway without using up the entire deck length, which prevents aircraft from being lined up ready to launch as another is landing. This is especially important when you think of aircraft missing the arrestor wires during recovery and doing a go-around, and every aircraft carrier designed by the US at least, since the Midway class, has had this signature feature. They are instantly recognisable, they're one of the most important aspects of carrier operations for naval jets, and if War Thunder wants to be taken at all seriously, they should really think about modelling a jet-era CV into the game. One like the Forrestal class, which was the first class of supercarrier originally built with an angled flight deck. Midways and even some Essex class carriers were rebuilt with angled flight decks in the 1950s and 60s, but the Lexington classes we're going to be launching 1960s F4 Phantoms off in patch 1.91, well, these were decommissioned in 1945, before naval jet aircraft even existed at all. I suggest the Forrestal class because even aircraft as old as F-2H Banshees did serve on Forrestal class supercarriers initially, as did Cougars and FJ4s, all the way through the F-3H Demon, F-4 Phantom, F-14 Tomcats even, and I'm not certain, but I would only assume F-18 Hornets even launched off of USS Forrestal, as she was only decommissioned in the 1990s after the Persian Gulf War, and eventually scrapped just 4 years ago in 2015. This would mean that it could be modelled to appear in air battles from rank 5 and above, and would never need replacing with an even more modern carrier, a Nimitz for example, no matter how modern our jets get in-game. An absolutely epic design that would make battles in naval jets just that wee bit more realistic and immersive, and how cool would it be to launch 2 F4 Phantoms side by side off of those catapults, and bring them back in to land on those angled landing strips. Anyway lads, that is going to be it for this video. Those are just 5 of the many little additions I'd like to see come to War Thunder in the future. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe, hit that notification bell, join the 360 squad, and let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. What do you think about these suggestions? Which, if any, would you like to see the most? And what are some similar suggestions you'd like to add? Perhaps I'll feature them in the next episode. Come follow me on Twitter and Twitch, join the Discord, and check out Patreon or hit the join button here on YouTube if you'd like to support the channel further. Thank you lads all so much for watching, have a lovely good day, and always remember, keep your bagpipes to hand, keep your kilt on, and I shall see you next video. I say a wee thank you to these lads for supporting me on Patreon. Captain Thubar, DA261, Gisli Gadarson, and Dark Recon. You lads are bra. If you wish to join them, come check out the link in the description below.